Hi, guys. Let's just start off. If I sound off a little bit nervous, it's because I am, because this is my first OFF presentation. But I want to rewind a bit back in time. Maybe 7 years ago, I was a volunteer in OFF London. Yes, there was a London edition, and they never did it again. It's pretty sad. But during that time, when I volunteered, I made it a goal to be a speaker at OFF, and now here I am. So let's have an applause for that. So if you're here today, first of all, I'm honored that you're actually willing to listen to anything I have to say and listen to my story. But I'm assuming you guys either don't know what digital fashion is, or you have a little inkling of what it is, because it's a new industry. And so I'm going to do a lot of explaining today and what I do as a digital fashion artist. I am many things. Digital fashion artist is one of them, but I'm also a content creator. I'm also an educator. And so I do a lot of things, and I just thought today is a day to tell you guys all about it. So the first thing is, what is digital fashion? And I'm not going to ask you guys, don't worry. But if I were to ask you guys, I feel like you guys would think of it along the lines of something like this, where there's a mixture of avatars, maybe even metaverses, maybe even combining fashion with games, or even overlaying, photoshopping some digital clothes on top of your image. But the best way I can describe it is these three terms here. And I absolutely love it because this simplifies it a lot. So it's a mixture of 3D, fashion, and tech. And if you guys are interested within these realms, you can get into digital fashion. But one thing I want to go back to is this is a personal story of mine and how I approach my work and my work ethic. And this is me probably 10 years old, having the best time of my life. I think this field actually doesn't exist anymore. It's quite sad. They've built some apartments over it. But when I was a kid, I am that stereotypical, over-high-achieving Asian kid, because I used to do a lot of things with my time as a kid. Apart from school, I used to play piano, have tutoring, tennis lessons, dancing lessons. I did a lot. And I might have been a little bit overworked as a kid, but I found out that I'm pretty good at multitasking, and I found out that I'm really good at learning many different things, because I can assure you, I'm not a master at all of those things I just noted. But I am also a self-taught designer. Actually, my journey started in graphic design. It's what I studied at university in London. I didn't really like graphic design in the end. I didn't like how static it was. And actually what really spoke to me was 3D animation, or just animation in general, because I grew up watching Disney, Ghibli, Pixar animation, and I just loved the storytelling aspect of it. And so with all of that, I think the best teacher I had was YouTube, because now, in terms of all the programs that I use, there's a lot. There's a lot. And, Adobe for graphic design, mostly. Cinema 4D for the 3D motion design, which I moved into next. And then I finally moved into digital fashion from 2020. And can I just say, 3D programs are expensive. All of these are subscription, and I actually might have to consider Blender. But this is the type of work I used to create. It used to be a lot of abstract 3D art, if you will. I mean, I did have a good time as a freelancer in 3D motion design, but within all of these styles, it didn't feel like me as an artist. It didn't feel like it best represented who I am. And actually, fast forward to now, this is how my work looks like. And I think it's the best representation of who I am as a person, as a 3D artist, but also as a British Chinese kid in London, because I didn't feel that representation or didn't feel that confidence in my identity as an artist until I met digital fashion. And you can see with my style here, it's like a mixture of streetwear with traditional Chinese elements in it. So if you guys have seen my work, it probably looks something like this. But I want to go to a pivotal moment in my career, which was the year 2020. And that was the year where everybody remembers, pandemic. But for me, it was a year that really changed my career because I got so much of my time back. I used to work full-time, and I used to travel into London, an hour and a half in, hour and a half out. That was 3 hours already. And I got those 3 hours back, and I was thinking, okay, what do I do with that? What do I do with my time? I started learning Marvelous Designer, which is the garment creation program. And this is my home cave. I'm very proud of it. It's a place which I happily go and work in every day. And as a freelancer, I think where you work every day and how you display, or I suppose how clean it is and how you display it with pride, I think it's super important because you work there every single day. But let's move on to some projects that I actually got the pleasure of working on. So, how many of you guys, I can't see you guys here because the light's shining on me. How many of you guys don't like NFTs? Raise your hands. Oh, okay. That's actually less than I thought. All right, you guys there, I'll find you outside. We can fight about this. Yeah? So, I've had the pleasure of actually working on this, especially during 2020, 2021, when NFTs was the latest thing. But this was a project that I worked on with Glenfiddich and Highsnobiety. If you guys don't know who Glenfiddich is, they are a whiskey company. And I was equally surprised when a whiskey company asked me, hey, Steffi, we would love for you to make digital fashion. And I thought, alcohol, digital fashion, it's not really marrying up here, but let's do it. And actually, their brief was, Steffi, we would love you to take our packaging and transform it into digital fashion and then sell it as NFTs. I thought, okay, challenge accepted. So in terms of my process, I would always start off with a sketch, then build it in Clear 3D or Marvelous Designer in 3D, bring it into Cinema 4D for scene building and rendering. And they also gave me an extra task of wearing my digital fashion pieces. And I was like, Photoshop is not my forte. It really was not, because they saw one picture that I photoshopped on my Instagram, and they said, Steffi, you can do this, so you can do this for this project. And I thought, all right, since you're paying me, okay. And now I look back at this, and I'm like, I think I could have done better. But fast forward a year later, it looks more like this. I gotta say, my photoshopping skills got a little bit better after this. And I guess for me, the reason why I Photoshop so much, and actually we'll go back a little bit, is that I like to play with I suppose, the reality between digital to physical, because I think that connection between the two is super interesting, and you're going to see a lot of that theme throughout this presentation. But yes, this was an interesting project that I worked on, which I didn't expect I would be in my own advert. And Dell, the technology company, reached out saying, Steffi, we would love you to create a digital fashion animation, and then we're going to build a whole campaign around it. And actually, the company who was in charge of that, I think it's Savage Studios, if I'm correct, they are here speaking at OFFF, so they were in charge of that. I'm going to show you guys the project first, and then we can talk about the process. Thank you. So yeah, now I can tell my mum I made it in an advert. I ticked off my list right there. But this is actually the animation that I created, and excuse me, they gave me a brief. Water, sorry. Give me a sec. They gave me a brief that was enter your universe. And my universe was entering digital fashion. And so I was envisioning this Ready Player One situation where you just walk into this portal and you're into the digital fashion world. And so again, my process starts with sketching. I love Procreate. I find it's the fastest way to get my idea across to the client, and also just for me to visualize in my brain before I start making it in 3D. And they also did a really cool thing where, again, the digital to physical reality. And they decided to dress me in the creation that I created in 3D. But the behind the scenes were not that sexy. It actually looks like, the bestest way I can describe this is I look like a turkey on Christmas. And if it wasn't sexy, or we can say Power Ranger. I think I prefer that one. I look like Power Ranger. But the actual set and the actual, I suppose, the shoot location was absolutely incredible. We filmed it in Bulgaria. There was this huge LED screen where when the camera moved, it would track with the LED screen and it would move in real time. And actually, I think the next slide will show it a bit better. And when I mean huge, it was absolutely huge. And they used it in the Mandalorian film as well, which is super interesting because it actually reduced the need for post-production. And yeah, in the scene, there's no green screen. And actually, you can see this guy blowing the wind in my hair. I have no faith in advertising anymore. He's blowing fake wind, and I'm like, okay, it's really not as glamorous as you guys think it is, but it was a lot of fun. And then we're going to move on to digitals, which I think you guys might be able to guess what that means. It's, again, a blend between physical and digital, and that's something that I'm very interested in experimenting with. And so a lot of my work starts with digital animations. In fact, all of my work starts with 3D animations. And this piece right here is a piece that I wore for London Fashion Week, which is super exciting because it was my first ever physical made piece. And it started off like this. It started off in digital, and I absolutely love it. I wish I could be in that world right there. But then it moved into physical, which I worked with a company called Digital Twin in London to produce. And actually, this one on the right, that's digital. It's not real. And I feel like my photoshopping skills leveled up again. So, and I posted this on my Instagram asking people, is this real? Is this digital? And the people who are really proficient at Photoshop said, nah, it's not real, I can see. But actually, I filled quite a lot of people. And we also had a moment with Digital Fashion Week. And yes, that is a thing. There is a Metaverse Fashion Week, Digital Fashion Week, and of course, traditional Fashion Week you would have in London. But it was just a moment where I love just seeing the connection between, again, you would see the digital piece on screen. And the most important thing about linking the both is that they must be the same. They must be exactly the same, otherwise it completely loses its magic. And that goes the same for virtual worlds. Actually, this is a metaverse called Decentraland. And what's interesting about it is that if anybody collects my NFT tokens that I've created of this piece, they can actually redeem an in-game wearable and wear a piece that I designed, which is super exciting, again, going from digital to physical, whichever world you're in. And I've been experimenting with, I suppose, digitals for the past 8 months. So it actually hasn't been that long. And there's a great deal for me to learn because I don't come from a fashion background. I actually come, again, from graphic design to 3D, and now digital fashion designer. So actually having help and experimenting with all of these, I'm learning more and more about fashion and how we can potentially change the fashion industry as well. But I want to move on to a project that I actually released last month, roughly. And it's an NFT collection which I built based upon the Year of the Dragon. If you guys know anything about Chinese culture, there's always, every single year, there's a new zodiac animal, and it's their year. And this year, Year of the Dragon, which is a pretty awesome creature to work with. But I'm going to tell you guys a little story about it, just to give you a bit of context. There's 4 of them, right? There's 4 dragons. We've got the pearl dragon, long dragon, the yellow dragon, and the black dragon, okay? And they all come from the Eastern Sea. And they were playing one day. They were flying up into the air, going into the sea, and they actually looked at Earth and saw the humans were quite unhappy. And they said, why do they look unhappy? And actually, there was a drought. So there was no rain, no water. And so they decided to do something about it and help the humans. And they decided to go up to the heavens, to the Jade Emperor, and inform him that there's no water. But the Jade Emperor, he didn't really care. He said, yeah, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll give them rain. But the next day came, no rain. So these 4 dragons thought, okay, what can we do? Because he promised rain and there's no rain. Let's help them ourselves and actually swallow some water and spray it up into the air, and it will come down as rain. Now the humans were happy, but one person was not happy, and I think you guys can guess. The Jade Emperor, right? And he was so unhappy, he decided to imprison them under 4 mountains in different locations of China, and they actually represent the 4 great rivers that are in China right now. So especially in Chinese culture, there is a huge connection between, I suppose, mythological creatures and nature. So I'm going to show you guys the campaign video for this project, and I will talk about the process after. And so, this is an NFT collection, right? And you're thinking, probably some of you thinking, why NFT collection, Steffi? There's a great connection between people who collect something digitally and you're able to reward them. And one of the ways I can reward anybody who collects my artwork is what you're seeing, what I'm wearing now, digital redeemables. And there's something beautiful about that because in the fashion industry, it is one of the most polluting industries in the world because there's, mass production and, a lot of waste, let's say. But if you were to do this sort of system, which they call made-to-order system, where you have a digital asset and people buy into it, they're interested in actually wearing a physical piece, you can see how many people have collected it, you can see how many people actually really want it, and then you can make it to order. So that, from a sustainability standpoint, is pretty good. But on top of that, we also made digital versions. Now, I talked about a gaming world called Decentraland earlier, but this one's a different one. It's called Sandbox. And again, it's just another metaverse, it's just another game. But the point is that people can find different ways to express themselves, whether it's digitally or physically. Which means there's a lot of potential. And this is what I find really interesting about working in digital fashion, is all about the tech. As much as it is about 3D, as much as it is about fashion, it is mostly about the tech and where it can go into. But now we're going to move on to something called augmented reality, and actually I'm sure you guys are well versed with that. Instead, we are going to go into body tracking, which is not as popular. And actually, there are only a few companies who do this. I think Snapchat does it right now. There's one which I worked with, called 010, and I think, to be honest, they're one of the best to do with body tracking. It is incredibly hard to get the physics right, where the garment, which is such an organic shape, to work with AR. But I decided to play with this last year. I actually went to Paris and decided to make another digital piece to let people try at a conference. And the good thing about this is that no matter what shape or size you are, you can just hold up your camera and just let anybody try. And I love that in terms of accessibility-wise. It's just so free, and there's no restrictions in terms of who can try it. But I'm planning to try more of this because I think out of everything that I've talked about, AR has the most potential to onboard people who's never looked at digital fashion before, and it's a lot of fun as well. And now we're going to move on to AI. Big term of the year, if I'm honest, and maybe even last year. So I got to work on a project with Lenovo, actually, because they had a tech conference highlighting their AI solutions that they were doing that year. And they came to me and said, Steffi, we would love you to use digital fashion, AI, and our tech, and create some digital fashion. Use all of that, create digital fashion. I thought, okay, again, challenge accepted. Is a really interesting brief. And so I decided to write a prompt, and this was the prompt. A person wearing streetwear sweatshirt with graphic lines and a modern cloud embroidered Chinese design will be standing in a Lenovo tech, innovation, minimalistic, and futuristic world. And in the end, I got results like this, which, to be honest, I wasn't happy about because it was super stereotypical. It just looked like they came out of Chinatown, and I'm not about that. For me, I was trying to emulate or use AI to emulate something that would actually represent my style, which is, again, typically will be a combination of streetwear, a combination of urban settings, and traditional Chinese elements. But after a few iterations, I did come to something like this, which I was finally happy with. And in the end, after I created it all, this was the animation. Again, based on the reference, it was pretty similar. So they said, Steffi, we love this animation, but we don't want to stop there. We want you to make it physically. I was like, guys, this project's only 2 weeks. In terms of if you guys ever made anything physically, that's insane. It's a very short timeline. But I did it anyways, because I thought, you know what, let's try. And again, I worked with a company called Digital Twin. They actually digitally printed my designs on top of a fabric. And I brought it to Texas, which is where they were having their Lenovo Tech World. And what was super interesting was that they wanted to show not only my creation, but they showed it with the host in front of the Lenovo CEO, and it was streamed to at least 4 million people online. So it was definitely a moment.
Isn't that right, Matt?
So that was fun. But on top of that, I also got to share my creations first time with other people. And, not being a fashion designer, this was super scary because I didn't know how people were going to react. But these people here, they were also fellow content creators who were part of the tech industry. So it was really awesome to see that how my digital creations go into physical and how I was able to build connections with that. But I like to call myself an artist and a designer. I mean, this is a question I think about all the time, and maybe you guys do too as well. And it's interesting because I come from a design background. But as I grow in my career, I find that I am more and more growing as an artist because I'm telling my story and putting a lot of my identity into my work. And I wouldn't have it any other way, to be honest. But most of all, as I mentioned in the beginning, I am also a content creator, which means I create a lot on social media. And the reason why I do this is because digital fashion is such a niche industry. But I promise you, in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be absolutely huge. And so I use my platform as a way to not only show my process, kind of like what I'm doing here, but also just show what's possible and how it can relate to people who are working in the 3D industry, how it can relate to people working in the fashion industry and the tech industry. But I'm also an educator because, again, marrying up all of those 3 skills, whether it's 3D, fashion, or tech, can be hard. And even just, I suppose, if you guys ever started learning 3D, even that itself is a whole subject. There's just so many things that go into it. So I spend my time, I do weekly Twitch streams, and it's probably the only time I talk to people because I'm a freelancer, I work by myself, but I call this my social time. So if you guys are available on a Wednesday, I would love to see you. But I also have channels like YouTube, got a Domestika course, got a Patreon as well. Again, it's all about sharing knowledge. It's all about educating people about the space because it's not one that is so well known of. But at the end of the day, I would call myself workaholic. And it's interesting because I became a freelancer and I end up like this because when I was working full-time, I thought, you know what, it'd be so interesting to be in charge of my own time and finally get some of my time back from 9 to 5, but I actually end up working more because I produce so much content. I learn a lot of technical skills, and then I have to execute it, and it turns out to be quite a lot. So I've got a few tips for you guys, if you guys are even interested in digital fashion or just in general as a creative. I think the most important thing I've learned as an individual is that it's okay to start in a new industry. I mean, I jumped from graphic design to 3D to then digital fashion. I never envisioned myself to be a digital fashion artist, not what I set out to do. I actually thought I would be a motion designer for the rest of my life, but that did not happen. So I think working in a new industry can be super scary, but if you're willing to put the work into it, and I know how hard it is to work, especially after work, you don't want to do more work, but even just spending an hour after your normal 9-to-5 work or your studio hours, it will help you get to where you want to be. And the last tip I'm going to give to you, just because I work with so many people as a freelancer, is that be a good person to work with. There's many, many times that I've worked with somebody who's not nice, and at the end of the day, if I was going to recommend someone to work with, I would not recommend a person that is a bit stuck up. So just be a good person to work with, be curious, don't be scared to learn. And that is my presentation. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it. Thank you.